Hello, everybody. Are you saying yes too much? I mean, are you setting your boundaries and are you learning to say no and making sure that you have the time and you're not getting stressed out and burned out? That is a lot of the physicians I've been speaking to's problem is being able to say no when you really mean no instead of saying yes to everything. We're going to be talking to an expert today, but my name is Dr. Elsie Coe. I'm the founder and CEO of a lead physician online leadership program for physicians, also the chief medical officer of American Endovascular and Amputation Prevention. Also go to our YouTube channel and subscribe so that you're alerted for any new videos that come on. And let's just talk about this topic, okay? How to say no when you're the one who's always saying yes. Is that you? We're talking to an expert today, Sheetal Ajmani. Dr. Ajmani is the founder of Radiant Living Institute. And what she does is she really helps physicians get unstuck and live radiantly again. We need to learn how to deal with, be more resilient, learn how to deal with burnout, learn to deal with our self-talk. And she's all about that. She's the host of podcast Essential Self-Care. And she's also a co-author of a best-selling book called Doctoring Better. Let's bring her on right now. Sheetal, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, Dr. Coe. This is honestly one of my favorite topics to chat about, so I'm excited to share.
Okay, great. So let's get to it. How do you say no when you're the only one saying, you're always saying yes to everything and you can't help it? How do we start?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, first of all, awareness is everything. So even just recognizing that that's something that you're doing and noticing how that makes you feel, I think is the first step, right? So what is saying no? It's really setting boundaries, right? And so starting there, and noticing what emotions arise for you with that. Does fear, does feelings of anxiety surround that? And then looking at, well, what's behind those feelings that are coming up for you? We all have this basic human need, all of us, to feel loved and accepted. And so often those feelings of fear, those anxiety can come from a fear of, if I say no, am I not going to be loved or accepted, right?
Right.
In some way, shape, or form, right? The words we may use may be different, but in some way, shape, or form. So here's the thing, though, and the first point I want to make. I have 3 things I want to chat about your mindset, because honestly, if we don't start there with the awareness and your thoughts and feelings behind boundaries and saying no, then we can't take that action. So we're going to go into both of those pieces today. So here's the thing, though. Boundaries are, and I got this quote, I actually saw it on Instagram, to be honest with you, a few years ago, and it really stuck with me. But the author of this quote is Prentice Hemphill, and it is, boundaries are the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. And that's so powerful. And I like to always add another little piece here. So in my own words, boundaries are the space from which I can love and respect you and me at the same time, right? Whether this is personal or professional situation, it is, saying no it's not selfish. It is creating that space for love, respect, understanding between yourself and for yourself, as well as the other person involved or the situation involved, right? So that's number 1 in terms of kind of that mindset. The second is knowing that when you say yes, when you're really meaning no, that can lead to feelings of resentment.
Yeah.
Right. So again, I think we, can tend to think of saying no. Well, is that me being selfish? Is that showing that I'm not, quote unquote, good enough in some way? But actually, when you say yes and you really mean no, you may notice that it can lead to feelings of resentment. So although all these sort of uncomfortable feelings can arise when you think about saying no to someone, a lot of uncomfortable feelings can arise when you also say no, or when you also say yes, but you mean no. Right?
Right.
All those feelings can come up kind of in your gut, because your gut instinct is saying, no, this isn't right for me right now. I can't put another thing on my plate, right? I can't pick up another project right now. And so you actually honoring that, vocalizing that, is you being authentic, being true to yourself, And you're actually protecting that relationship and protecting that
Yeah.
situation. You're saying this relationship, again, personal or professional, or this situation, whether it's a work situation or a situation at home, is important to me. And I don't want to build up feelings of resentment, and I want to protect that.
Got
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
And then the third thing that I want to mention about mindset, because again, this is the biggest piece here, is that when you say no to something, you're actually saying yes to something else. So say you're at work and someone asks you to take on another project, and you know that you are already at your limit. You are stretched to the limit. You're already barely getting enough time to spend with your family. You're already not sleeping well. And so you know that if you say yes to that, well, that's just going to cut into all of that self-care, family time that's already being affected. So if you say no to that, what are you saying yes to? You're saying yes to more quality time with your family, more quality time with your children. You're saying yes to getting a good night's sleep because you know that when you don't get a good night's sleep, that affects how you show up the next day.
Right. Right. Very good. I love that. That's so important. Setting, understanding what's going on when you say yes or no, and the consequences behind that. Can we talk about how? So, give me some like top 3 things that we can do and take away right now. If I'm always saying yes, how do I start saying no? How do I make it easier
Yeah.
for myself?
Exactly. So of course the mindset is a big piece, but then how do you actually execute on this? How do you actually put
Exactly.
this into action? So, you've addressed the mindset. How do you put it into the action? So the first part is awareness. So starting to recognize which situations you need to begin to set boundaries in, right? So, and it could be a situation, it could be setting boundaries with a person, it could be setting boundaries with yourself. This topic is so important to me that this is actually an entire module in my signature online and coaching program called Reclaim Your Radiance. I have an entire module on this where I walk you through a step-by-step framework. But I'm going to walk you through
We're going
these.
to talk about your website after this. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm going to walk you through these 3 steps here. But I just want to share a client of mine who went through that program. She realized that the boundary that she needed to set actually wasn't with anyone else. It was with herself.
Okay.
She's a solopreneur, an entrepreneur, and realized that the boundary she wasn't setting was with herself and managing her own schedule. So I bring that up because sometimes that boundary is something that we need to set in a situation or with another person, and sometimes it's within ourselves as well. So awareness: what is the boundary that needs to be set? What is the situation? Who do we need to set this boundary with?
Right.
The second is taking a look at just kind of thinking through the consequence of setting the boundary and of not setting the boundary, right? What is the consequence of that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, kind of going back to that, when you say no to something, what are you saying yes to, right?
Right.
Also, I think the other thing to think about with these, when talking about consequences with regards to boundary setting, so most often when you set a boundary and when it's communicated respectfully, most of the time it's actually very well received. So that fear and that anxiety that we have around it of it not being well received, of people maybe thinking less of you, most of the time that doesn't even exist. Most of the time when you do communicate your boundary, it is actually well received. In fact, people may find it inspiring or even have more respect for you for setting that boundary, for speaking your truth, right? There are occasions where someone may not understand your boundary. They may not respect it, and it may not be well received. So that happens, but a lot less often.
Right.
And so thinking through for yourself, if that happens,
Mm-hmm.
what's the consequence of that? How are you going to react in that situation as well, right?
Right.
Because, and I like to always mention, if that does happen, that is more of a reflection of that other person than it is of you. So just know that. Not even more of, it's completely a reflection of the other person than it is of you. So know that. And also, I wanted to bring up this, just think of a fence. Like if you have a fence in your yard, the fence only works if it is intact, right? If the fence is broken, if you leave the door open, or if you haven't even built the fence, but you just have all the wood there and it's laying on your yard, but it hasn't even been built yet, well, it's not going to work, right? It's not going to protect what it's meant to protect. It's not going to keep in what it needs to keep in and keep out what needs to stay out, right? And so a boundary only works if you communicate it, set it, and follow through on it. Right. So think of that fence.
Yeah.
So that's the second step. And then the third step is actually communicating that boundary. So finding a way to communicate that boundary. And if this is something new for you, I would say rehearse it, practice it at home, practice it in front of a mirror, practice it with a friend or a family member, right? Practice it in a space first where you do feel safe and comfortable.
Exactly.
And my one piece of advice that I would give with regards to communicating your boundary is keep it short, simple, to the point. Remember, no is a complete sentence, right? We
Mhm.
have a tendency to want to almost over explain ourselves, and that's not necessary. Just keep it short, keep it simple, and keep it to the point.
Right. So, I love that. My problem is when I hear someone say, or if somebody asks me to do something and I say no, I feel bad. And you're saying that saying no is love for yourself and love for the other person. How can we start seeing that as good for the other person?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, part of it is that idea that I talked about before of sometimes when you say yes, but you really mean no, it can build those feelings of resentment, which then affects the relationship as a whole,
Got it.
right?
Yes, I see. I see what you mean. Yeah, because then you can start things that you don't even realize are deep rooted in our subconscious. Like we don't even realize these thoughts that we're having half the time. We're not even really awake, like which is why this whole mindset piece is important. But then we're gonna go about our day holding this grudge, and then we might notice the other person having so much free time, and you're like, why am I doing this? And then it gets worse, and the relationships gets broken. So that's very good. Thank you so much for this. As we're concluding, because this is a very short podcast, tell us a little bit about more how someone can find out more information about what you offer, Dr. Ajmani. Okay.
Absolutely. So my website is radiantlivinginstitute.com, and there you'll also find information about my signature program that I mentioned called Reclaim Your Radiance, which is a 6-module online and coaching program where I have an entire module on boundaries because I do think it is that important. I'm also on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Sheetal Ajmani MD.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for watching. I appreciate it. My name is Dr. Elsie Cohen. If you have any specific topic on physician leadership that you'd like to share on this podcast, I would love to hear from you. Reach out to me at info@drlcco.com. Also, we do have ongoing leadership training for physicians. And if you're trying a new venture, you want a career change, you just want to have a quick talk, go to leadphysician.org and schedule a call with us. Any last words of advice for us, Dr. Ajmani, as we close?
I would say just think about again kind of where you need to set that boundary, what that means to you. Start with that. It all starts with awareness.
So good. Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for watching. Until next week.